On the 15th of April 2021, Infinity Train gave its final curtain call, for real this time. The likelihood of the show's continuation was on the rocks for a while, but it seems like this might really be the note we conclude on. Ending with its 4th season, Infinity Train has surely cemented itself as one of the finest anthology series of all time, both within and without the medium of animation. For 4 seasons, it tackled weighty themes of divorce anxiety, grief, selfhood, and even the permanence of death. To describe Infinity Train as a standout in Western animation would frankly be an understatement. And now, it's all over. Let's talk about it. It's not easy to end a series, especially one with a fan base as devoted as Infinity Train's. The quality of a show's final moments can make or break an entire series, with some less popular finales retroactively tarnishing the fans' love of what came before. In that sense, a final series bears a lot of responsibility. So, what about Infinity Train? Is Book 4 everything we'd hoped it would be? How does it stack up against the rest of the series, and how does it stand alone by its own merits? That is what we're talking about today, folks. This is Curmudgeon Media, my name's Tom, and today we'll be breaking down the end of Infinity Train. But before we dive into Book 4, I feel like it's important to quickly overview what this show is and what's so great about it. Infinity Train, created by Owen Dennis, is an anthology series which follows various characters as they become trapped on a mysterious, interdimensional locomotive. The only thing that unites these characters is that they are all at an impasse in their lives. Something or another has stilted their personal development. The train thus appears to them, ascribes them a number that in some way reflects the severity of their personal problems, and they have to get this number down to 0 if they want to leave. True to its title, the train appears to go on indefinitely, made up of infinite cars that all reflect in unique ways upon the passengers attempting to navigate and escape. With each car they traverse, these passengers grow closer and closer to understanding themselves, chipping that number down piece by piece as they go. As such, the series is far more mature in tone than other shows aimed towards kids and teens, and honestly that's part of why it's so powerful. Each season is a study of its respective protagonist, unpacking their vices and insecurities in as much detail as 10 episodes can afford, with only 10 minutes a pop. Although I will say that any pretense of this being a kids show is dead by the end of season 3. Wow. Book 1 gave us a story about a young girl overcoming her parents' divorce. Book 2 gave us a couple of characters desperately scrambling for individuality, identity, and a sense of self. Book 3 gave us a moving redemption arc. So what about Book 4? Book 4, subtitled Duet, takes place a few decades prior to the events of Book 1. In a first for Infinity Train, the story revolves around 2 characters in equal measure. Of course, we've had protagonists and deuteragonists before, but never 2 protagonists of equal focus. Our leads are Min-gi Park and Ryan Akagi, a couple of guys whose stories have been intertwined since birth. They grew up together, they developed their aspirations together, and now they have to escape the train together. As the subtitle suggests, this season follows a kind of musical motif. From an early age, Min-gi and Ryan dreamt of being musicians, but as time goes by, complications arise, adulthood comes knocking, and these ambitions are obscured. We'll explore those complications in a little bit.
We're fine. We're great.
Min and Ryan are separated for a year after they fall out, leaving Ryan pursuing an amateur tour without his partner. But upon Ryan's return, Min has got himself a job and has been accepted into university.
I got into uni. I'm gonna major in finance with an emphasis on risk assessment.
It's clear that there are some unspoken anxieties in this relationship. One has abandoned his dreams and the other is sort of careering into them aimlessly. Since their journeys are inherently connected, it's only a matter of time before they're both picked up by the Infinity Train and left to figure it out amongst themselves. Infinity Train has always been a character-driven show, and Book 4 is no exception. The character writing is really strong. Just like Lake and Jesse before them, Min and Ryan exhibit conflicting personalities that play off one another beautifully. Min's introverted, reserved yet arrogant personality contrasts Ryan's devil-may-care ethos that hides an unspoken inferiority complex. These clashing character traits are the cause of so much humour and conflict and drama. It's not just that these characters are fundamentally likeable and funny and confused and a little bit broken. Book 4 straddles a delicate line between making these characters flawed and toxic in their own way, without pushing it so far that they become, well, Simon. Yet, similarly to Grace and Simon of Book 3, the issues Min and Ryan are experiencing are years in the making. Deep cognitive issues that correspond to their upbringing and key moments that leave permanent marks. Min's family is overbearing, showing no support for his creative endeavours and instead pushing him down the road of academia. As such, Min is stage shy and has seemingly abandoned his dreams of musicianship.
But music's what we always wanted. It's what you always wanted.
His strict and judgmental parents have clearly warped Min into an extremely anxious child, always concerned with what others think or might think. At the same time, his family have ingrained academia into Min's sense of self-worth. He believes himself to be fundamentally smarter than Ryan and is later seen patronising and babying him. It's essential that we understand the trajectory of where these negative behaviours come from, so that we don't write these characters off entirely for their less savoury actions.
Hey now! Each little step can help Ryan learn.
I'm just trying my best.
Ryan, on the other hand, comes from a far less involved family. Unlike Min, who is an only child, Ryan is but one of a large number of children. We get hints early on that Ryan is perhaps a little estranged from his parents in a way that Min is not.
So, do you think our parents know where we are?
In an Old West bug jail? I'm gonna say no.
But they'll wonder where we went to. At least, yours probably will.
You may be trying to remember something of Ryan's parents, but you can't because they're mostly absent throughout the season, spoken of but rarely seen. On occasion, Ryan hints that his parents aren't really that interested in him. After all, being one sibling of many is often thought to diminish a child's sense of individual worth.
I joined the circus because I was scared of spending the rest of my life as part of a matched set.
This lack of involvement from Ryan's family is why he's so untethered and free, rarely thinking ahead or considering the consequences of his actions. This is bound to impact Min with his more anxious personality and is clearly an indicator of the rift in their relationship. For example, when Ryan organises an amateur tour, he gives Min only a week's notice.
Next week! You still have a week to pack. To pack my whole life?
But Ryan's uninvolved family is also why he's got that inferiority complex. Combine that with Min's often patronising personality and things get complicated. But unlike previous seasons, the insecurities and toxic traits that they have to overcome are intrinsically tied. All of this is to say that Book 4 does a stellar job of developing its characters and weaving their arcs together in a way that is complex and satisfying to watch play out and eventually resolve. While the characters are at the forefront of the show, the peripheral elements are equally important to the overall experience. Visually, I'd be comfortable saying that Book 4 is the strongest season yet. It has a much more overt sense of style than previous books, and it's clear to see how far the creative team have come since their first adventure with Tulip. Episode 1 is a real standout, boasting some really moody and dramatic shot composition and a truly fantastic split-screen segment. Is that a Cowboy Bebop reference? This split-screen segment really is worth talking about though. It uses simple, subtle visual language to tell their story side by side, like the predominant use of close-ups and confined indoor spaces on Min's side versus the broad landscape shots and long shots of Ryan's side. A lot of consideration is placed into the colour coding of the characters, a theme which persists throughout the season. Min is typically coded with cold colours, indicating his closed-off and neurotic personality, while Ryan is coded with warm colours, reflecting his more laissez-faire and hot-headed behaviour. This might sound unimportant, but it's this kind of detail that makes Book 4 feel so complete in its art direction. Now onto everyone's favourite topic, pacing. I know, pacing is a difficult thing to talk about because it's kind of a vague concept, but this season is exceptionally well paced. Let me put it this way. They're able to fit 19 years of Min and Ryan's lives into a single episode without anything feeling rushed or skipped, and in a way that serves as crucial setup for the rest of the story. The only complaint I have about pacing concerns the last episode, but we'll get to that later. Part of what helps this season uphold its sense of pace is the humour, and this is possibly the funniest season of Infinity Train that we've had yet. I mean, the show's always had funny moments, but it's mostly carved out a niche for itself among the darker of children's animations, peaking in Book 3 with, well, that. But Owen Dennis was upfront about wanting to subvert our expectations of Book 4's tone, so it's only appropriate that they lean so heavily into humour. Whether or not humour lands is subjective, but to my eye, it definitely lands. This is helped to no end by the designated companion of the season, Kez.
Guys, no, this isn't Powell Lake, Canada, America. Why does your house have such a long name?
That's not the name of our house.
Apartment, whatever.
Kez is flighty, forgetful, erratic, and frankly hilarious. The situational comedy around her character is frequently bizarre.
We got this.
She's a belle. Why was that warm?
Minty Lewis, the voice of Eileen in the regular show, gives a stellar performance that just gives Kez so much life and personality. Just insane enough to be funny, but also relaxed and irreverent enough to keep her from becoming annoying. She has the nonchalant attitude of the dude, only with way more energy, and is also a belle. Of course, Kez brings the feels when it's necessary, but it just wouldn't feel right to talk about the comedy of Book 4 without talking about Kez. Overall, Book 4 is a wonderful standalone adventure. It has it where it counts, and joining Min and Ryan on this unique chapter of their story is complete, comprehensive, and yet I can't help but feel like something is out of place. This may be a great season in isolation, but it isn't in isolation, is it? It's the fourth and final season of Infinity Train, our beautiful, cancelled baby. How does this season hold up as the closing chapter? I do feel that something is off-kilter with this last season, but it isn't the fault of Owen Dennis and the rest of the Infinity Train crew. It's notorious at this point that Book 4 was never meant to be the end, and sadly, it shows. For example, the contrastingly comedic tone would have made Book 4 a fantastic change of pace midway through the series, but as the final season, it lacks the gravity we received in previous installments. That's not to say it doesn't have its dramatic moments, and when they're handled brilliantly. I'm so glad they didn't shy away from the racial angle that means a lot to so many viewers, even if it would have been nice to see it fleshed out in more detail.
We're just two Asian guys from BC in a band called Chicken Choice Judy. Can you think of anybody doing what we want to do who look like us?
To clarify, I'm not faulting the Infinity Train crew for doing something different. I'm simply acknowledging, as they do, the tragedy that this show was prematurely brought to an end, and in a way that impacts the final product. Besides, this is just my opinion. If you feel that ending the show on a lighter note felt right, that's totally valid. Personally though, I found myself yearning for those weightier moments that I love the show for. Book 3 might have had an open ending, but nevertheless it felt like such an emotionally powerful note to end on when we weren't sure there was going to be a Book 4. I hate to say it, but part of me feels like Book 4 is something of an anticlimax by comparison. And it's really hard to say this stuff because we all love Infinity Train. And knowing the studio interference the way we do, none of this is really criticism. Simply lamenting, I guess. Of course, tone isn't the only thing setting Book 4 apart from previous seasons. I think it would be safe to describe Book 4 as the most disconnected season of the bunch. Infinity Train is an anthology series, which means that every season is its own self-contained story with a beginning and an end. On one hand, this does mean that Book 4 has a story that is satisfying in its own right. But the truth is that each season of Infinity Train isn't nearly as disconnected as they might seem. Check out what Owen Dennis has to say. After completing Season 1, we realised we really liked Lake. We were afraid that people who thought the show would indefinitely focus on Tulip would feel betrayed by a new character. Lake let us ease people into featuring new protagonists every season. This doesn't stop with Lake though. As we know, Grace and Simon, who feature as antagonists in Book 2, are the focal point of Book 3. And to that end, when Amelia returned in Book 3 and Hazel's story was left without resolution, many people, such as myself, predicted that Amelia and Hazel would carry through into Book 4. But they didn't, and we'll come back to Amelia and Hazel in a moment. But for now, let's talk about Min and Ryan and the lack of continuity from previous seasons. In my opinion, handing us a totally disconnected story isn't a betrayal per se, but seasons 1 to 3 of Infinity Train felt very much like they were developing upon each other. The plot of each season might have been self-contained, but they expanded on groundwork established in the season prior. Book 4 doesn't have that same feeling of development. It does feature before-seen characters like the cat and Amelia, but since it's set before the events of Book 1, it doesn't entirely provide us with any new information. This feeds into my feeling that Book 4 was perfect as a mid-series break, a little adventure all to itself, but only emphasises how sad it is that Infinity Train was cancelled before certain ideas could be fleshed out and loose ends tied. And again, we'll come back to those loose ends in a moment when we discuss Amelia and Hazel in a little more detail, because a lot was planned for the future of Infinity Train. But there's one more thing I'd like to address before we talk about that future. What I'm about to address, like everything else I've said, isn't really a criticism per se, and I think bringing this up might bother a few people, but I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't talk about it. So back when the Book 4 trailer first dropped, I uploaded a video anticipating the possibility that Min and Ryan might be a romance. The video was a lot more than that really. In truth, I used Min and Ryan as an opportunity to discuss the topic of representation in cartoons, a topic that means a lot to me personally and to many others. If you've watched that video, you'll notice that only a fraction of it was Infinity Train related, an even smaller fraction discussing the Min and Ryan romance specifically. Either way, the feedback I got on that video showed me that so many people were enthusiastic about the possibility of an MLM relationship between the Book 4 protagonists. This is a relationship which never happened, at least not explicitly, but I'll elaborate in due course. I am not criticising Book 4 for not fulfilling that relationship. Book 4 is a fantastic, satisfying story in its own right, but I do want to open the floor to a discussion about queer coding, queer baiting, and how we distinguish between the two. Queer coding is when a story will imply a character or characters are queer without confirming it explicitly. Having seen Book 4 in its entirety, I still absolutely believe that these characters are in love, and if that bothers you, then I don't know, whatever. I think that the importance they hold in one another's lives goes far beyond that of a platonic relationship. This is just my opinion, but I've never known a platonic duo who were this intertwined. Furthermore, there are moments of intimacy which clearly evoke the impression of a burgeoning romance. There are other aspects to their relationship which are clearly queer-coded. For example, take this clip from episode 1 which shows the end of Ryan's various relationships during his year away. There's a lot going on here, and you can feel free to tell me I'm reaching if you want, but hear me out. First and foremost, it gives us the impression that relationships with women have not and do not work for him. In addition to this, it specifically codes his tour partners as romantic in nature. He has attempted to fill that space in his heart which was and is meant for Min-gi. Whether these women are bandmates, groupies, or just along for the ride, they create a scenario where Ryan's tour partner and his romantic partner are the same. Min is that partner. Do I think this is queerbaiting? No. Queerbaiting is a much more unpleasant term than queer coding. It refers to when characters are implied to be LGBTQ+ for marketing reasons without following through. It's pretty cynical and exploitative, but in the case of Infinity Train Book 4, it's a lot more complicated than that. I get the impression that the moons aligned for previous shows like She-Ra and Steven Universe, which managed to follow through on LGBTQ+ representation, not to mention the amount of brute force involved on their creators' behalf. This isn't the first time a relationship in Infinity Train was coded as romantic without seeing it through. I think it's pretty clear there's more going on with Lake and Jesse than just friendship, and that never receives a romantic resolution. I mean, when Noel Stevenson addressed the pushback they got for LGBTQ+ romance in She-Ra, they said they were told no romance. That's how broad it got. Let's just be extra safe, no romance whatsoever. I don't think it's hard to believe that these restrictions might extend to Infinity Train as well, but who's to say? Besides, I wouldn't peg the Infinity Train production team as the sorts to cynically exploit queer coding for marketing reasons. At the end of the day, there's the possibility that Owen Dennis wanted to code these characters as romantically involved. It's no more or less likely than coding Lake and Jesse. It's also perfectly possible that I'm just projecting and it was never there to begin with. But this is just my opinion. Now, without further ado, let's talk about... There's one big loose end that was never tied. I've talked about it a little, but we really do have to address the whole Amelia and Hazel situation. We now know that there was more in the works for Amelia and Hazel. I said before that in spite of Amelia's cameos in Book 4, nothing is specifically added. It's likely that's because it was merely set up for a movie Owen Dennis had in the works about Amelia's rise to power. And I know I keep saying this, but it really does solidify Book 4 not as a conclusion, but as the mid-series tangent it was designed to be. Without further information, it's hard to say exactly what this movie would have looked like. We already know the basis of how Amelia seized control of the train, but only in vague terms. But we also know that Amelia and Hazel were due to have their resolution later on, one which Owen Dennis describes as bittersweet and beautiful. So my best guess is that the movie might have been emotional setup for the end of Amelia and Hazel's story. Clearly, there was a lot in the works for this intellectual property we love so much. Even a video game. But as it stands, these are stories we aren't going to see, because Infinity Train was cancelled. Why was it cancelled? As of writing this video, we don't know for sure, but there are a few things to be said. Right now, Owen Dennis has only said, as near as I can tell, what Cartoon Network wants right now isn't what Infinity Train is giving. Back when Book 3 looked like it was going to be the end, Dennis had also suggested that the show's darker tone and subject matter might have been its downfall. My best guess is that's what he means when he says Cartoon Network doesn't want what Infinity Train is giving. Does this mean that Book 4 with its lighter tone might increase the likelihood of Infinity Train's renewal? Again, it's hard to say. I do have my own thoughts about the future of Infinity Train though, and it really does concern the issue of maturity. Owen Dennis published a sort of open letter which made one thing very clear. He is not happy with the state of Western animation, and hopes for a future where cartoons can be freely aimed at adults without needing to be comedies like Family Guy or South Park and so on. In his own words, "I want a new future for animation. I believe that in the next 3 to 4 years, an animated movie or two are going to be released in the US that does for animation what Jaws and Star Wars did for film. They'll act as a 1-2 punch that shows the Western world that animation can be for adults and teens, and not just for children. I've currently drafted several animated stories and scripts that are trying to make that future exist." On that note, I would like to draw a comparison between Infinity Train and another show that was once doomed to cancellation, Samurai Jack. I don't want to go into too much detail as to why Samurai Jack was cancelled or how it was renewed. That would derail the conversation, and in truth what matters is that Samurai Jack did return, and in a more mature form than anyone could have anticipated. Samurai Jack was a kids show that ended in its 4th season, without resolution, in 2004. More than 10 years later, it returned. The Jack we got in season 5 had aged with his audience. The season dived headfirst into weighty themes of shame, trauma, depression, suicide. What it gave us was exactly the kind of mature animation Owen Dennis wants to see more of. In fact, in Dennis's open letter, he cites Primal, a show created by Samurai Jack's own Genndy Tartakovsky, as a great example of serious adult animation. If Infinity Train doesn't get renewed right away, I sincerely hope that it returns just as Samurai Jack did, freed from the constraints of conservative kids animation and with a comfortable spot on the Adult Swim block. There's one more quote from Owen Dennis's open letter that I'd like to reference, and which basically says exactly what I mean. I've often said to my friends, I wish that we'd made Infinity Train 20 years ago so that we could get more made right now, because that's all that most studios are picking up. Give it 10 years or so, and maybe we'll see more Infinity Train as a new wave of nostalgia takes over the industry. But in the meantime, the show has been cancelled. So, that's it. It's all over. As far as we know, as of the moment I hit upload on this very video, Infinity Train is cancelled for good. But I'd like to be wrong. Book 4 is a great, standalone piece of a beautiful puzzle. It's an imperfect ending for reasons that cannot be helped, and have nothing to do with the quality of the season itself. But at the end of the day, the loose ends that were never tied serve only as a reminder of just how brilliant Infinity Train really is. At the beginning of this video, I made vague references to some of the themes that the show engaged with over the course of its 4 seasons, but I don't think any number of words can qualify just how well those themes are dealt with. I'm truly thankful that we got a show that was willing to really dig deep. It did more than tug on our heartstrings, it pulled them out of our chest. There's nothing quite like Tulip's tape, or that moment when Jesse leaves the train without Lake. There's nothing like Simon's descent into madness or Tuba's funeral. I mean, the fact that this show made me cry so hard over the death of a purple gorilla with brass instruments fastened to its shoulders is frankly remarkable. And now, we've got a bunch of brand new moments to add to our memory. The show might be over, for now, but we aren't. And by we, I mean the fans. You watching this video and me making it. I will be back to talk more about Infinity Train. There's still so much to be said, and I intend to make good on that. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like. It helps us in the algorithm. Hell, why not subscribe while you're at it? And if you have thoughts of your own that you'd like to share, please, the comment section is your oyster, and I'd love to continue the conversation below. If you'd like to chat with us more, we do have a Discord, and we'd be happy to have you on board. Either way, I hope you all have a lovely day, and we'll see you in the next video.